Alright, welcome to APUSH. Today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at your first video you got to watch for this class. I know it's the middle of summer, but hey, it's we got to start early in APUSH, so you kind of got to strap those boots on and get ready to go. Alright, so this video, one of the biggest things you're going to have to do in your summer assignment and one of the biggest skills you're going to have to learn for the rest of that class is how to take notes. There's going to be a lot of lecture, there's going to be a lot of in-class activities, there's going to be a lot of reading. So you're going to need to know how to summarize all of that, how to get the base information that you need to, and how to put it in a form that you're going to be able to remember. Notes, I am going to check notes every once in a while. I'm not going to say every chapter I'm going to check it, but you're never going to know which chapter I'm going to check for your notes. All right? So be prepared, be diligent with these. You're going to pay the price if you don't. That's not really threatening or anything, but the only way you're going to be able to get through this course and get anything out of it is if you actually do the reading and you understand the reading. There's quite a lot of information to go over, so you're going to have to do notes. And you're going to have to do notes on your own. When we get into these lectures, I'm going to have a PowerPoint, but there's hardly going to be any words on that PowerPoint. So if you're going to take notes on the lecture, you're going to have to learn how to do a shorthand of doing notes while I'm speaking, which is the number one way it's going to occur at college. Unless they've changed something in the last 10 years, that's the main way information is going to be delivered in college. You read a book at home, you come in, you listen to the lecture, you take notes on that lecture. You're also going to be taking notes on what you read. What we're going to focus on today mainly is going to be how to take book notes. They're a little bit more detailed than the notes you're going to take on a lecture, but a lot of times the information is going to be similar or the same. So if you get it from the book, all you're going to have to do is get really bits and pieces for the lecture. When you get into these lectures in AP, it's going to be more about participation, answering questions, asking questions, getting that discussion going. Some of it is going to be directed from me, but you're really going to need to push yourself to kind of ask good questions and get discussion going amongst that group. All right, you got to become really comfortable in that. All right, so let's take a look at this. How to read and take notes. Basic, simple. All right, this is going back to elementary school, right? Not as much. Really, the main thing I want you to get out of this is to take a look at what notes are supposed to do, and then also the styles of notes, and figure out one that you're going to be able to do and to stick with it and develop it. I don't want you to believe that you can't change your note-taking style during the year, but it really is a skill that you're going to have to build up, and that takes time, that takes practice. So really think of the type of notes you want to take, choose one, try it out. Within that first couple weeks, you really need to figure out one that's going to be comfortable for you and one that you can do really well. What I am going to do during the course is I'm going to give you basic outlines with just key terms and people and concepts that you need to know, that need to be in your reading notes. And then you can use that as a framework to build. Make sure you have those in your notes and then add those connections, add how they interact together. Okay? Alright, so let's do this. Alright, so what should notes do? Pretty simple. They got to summarize the important information of a reading section. Alright, so they got to get to the core, the root information. They got to be easy to follow. If you can't understand what's going on in your notes, nobody else is going to be looking at them, so it doesn't really matter. Make them easy to follow for yourself. They got to be quick to read. And you're not trying to create a set of notes just as thick as the book that you're reading from. These got to be summaries. They got to be really quick. The idea is that before a quiz, you want to be able to take a look at your notes in about 5 minutes and refresh your memory of what you need to know to be successful on that quiz. And you got to read more than once, and you got to provide places for those connections to be made. Right, so connections between different notes. You got to be able to kind of scribble out to the side, hey, this connects to B. Right, this is what this is meaning. This is clarifying that. This is extending it. This is how this concept works in a new situation. Right? So you gotta read more than once, and you've got to be able to make those connections with your notes. Right? Pitfalls. What you don't want to happen is you don't want to write entire paragraphs. Again, you don't want your notes to be as thick as the book that you were taking the notes from. You don't want to try to get every last detail. Your memory is going, if you take really well constructed notes, when you read a basic note, it's going to remind yourself of those details. It's going to recall that working memory. So you don't need every single detail. You need a well-crafted basic note that will then draw up that information. All right, you don't want to try to fit your thinking to a note style that doesn't work for you. If you're not a good drawer, if you're not a good artist, don't do visual notes. It's probably not going to work out for you. You're going to get confused on points. You're not going to be able to see it. If you're not a visual thinker, don't do visual notes. Don't do the concept maps. Do more of the outlining notes. Right? But each person is going to respond differently to a different note style. And don't take notes as you're reading a paragraph. Don't do it at the same time. Don't be sitting here with your book out and be saying, all right, I'm reading, all right, let me take that note. All right, reading some more, take that note. Read through. I know, I'm asking you to do something twice, but read through, then go back. And I promise you it's not going to take as much time that second time. You're probably going to be able to do the entire thing quicker once you get a couple practices in. Read through it one time, then go back. Once you've read through one time, you know what's going to be important in that chapter. So then you're going to take your notes. That second read through, not the first. You can't do it at the same time. It's not going to work. Alright, so these are the note styles that we're going to be covering today. Outlining notes, which you're probably really familiar with. It's the traditional note-taking style. Cornell notes, which is traditional, but it's got one little modification to it. Some people may be familiar with Cornell, some others may not. It's really big kind of in middle schools, but it works at all levels, and we'll take a look and see why. Concept mapping, so if you've ever done like bubble maps, that's what concept mapping is. Trying to show those connections, highlight those connections. Visual notes, if you're a good artist, that may be your way to go. And the non-existent route, ain't gonna cut it in this class. Don't do that. You gotta take notes. Alright? Finding your style. So let's take a look at outlining notes. It is the most traditional. It's what everybody knows. You start at the beginning of the book, you end at the end of the book. You put everything in lines. You write definitions, key terms. You may highlight them later. You're going to have your major headings, the topics within that section, and then you're going to have explanatory information. So this is the one everybody's familiar with, and if you're going, notes, I got to take notes, this is probably what you're thinking about. And it probably is a chore for you because it's not your style. You're probably more motivated with visuals and seeing connections between things. The tough thing with outlining notes, it is really good for people who write quickly, who can understand their handwriting really well. Not Mr. H. Yeah, my handwriting is sloppy, and you'll know that very soon after we start the course. And it's really well for those who kind of have that logical step-by-step kind of way about their thinking. Other people who are more concept-based, this is going to be hard for you. So beware of that. It's harder to make connections with outlining notes too, because you're basically going through chronologically and putting your notes down, and those connections may not be chronological connections. All right, the next one is Cornell style. I'm trying to move this out of the way for a second. Cornell style. You're going to divide your notebook into sections like this. Basically, when you're taking your notes here. You're trying to get your keywords, your ideas. This is mainly based for more of a lecture, but it works for books too. You keywords your ideas, everything. So the first read through, you just read it straight. That second read through, you're coming back here and you're taking your notes. You're leaving this part separate, and then you're leaving this part separate. Alright, so after you've taken your notes, you come back out here and you start to summarize your notes. The really big main ideas, what do you got to have? And then key questions. What are the main questions that are brought forth from this reading? And then at the bottom, you have to summarize your notes quickly in your own words. This seems like more of a process. It's going to help you, especially if you need to go over your notes a couple of different times. But for these notes to work, you have to do the process. You have to do A, then B, then C. Right? You can't skip one of those processes for this thing to be most effective. Right? Concept mapping is basically bubble maps. Right? You're taking this idea, this chapter, and you're starting to break the pieces of it apart, and you're putting your notes, and you're showing how these notes kind of come together and how these different terms fit together. Very visual, connects that information. It's a hierarchy really well. Physically, you can see the connections, you can see the scales, you can kind of see what is more important, what's less important. Again, the biggest benefit of this one is illustrating connections. The problem is if you start this and you aren't disciplined with it, you can run out of paper and it can get very messy. But there are systems online that help you out with this. And we can share some of those a little bit later, but I would suggest the first couple of times doing it on paper and then jumping into the online creation tools. And we'll mention those in class, about those creation tools for concept mapping, because we're probably going to use them in class a couple of times as well for class activities. All right, visual notes. If you are an artist and you doodle a lot and you think that's going to be your outlet as far as note taking, hey, more power to you. My notes, whenever I go to a meeting, they are mainly drawings. Right? That's just how I am. I can remember stuff from a meeting by drawing a fish or whatever, drawing a bird. Different information sparked. Maybe not that way. Maybe it's just I'm bored sometimes. Yeah, teachers get bored too, you know. But the big thing here is if you are motivated by visuals and you can kind of see those things, use it. Don't just dismiss it. Use it. But the big thing about this is you can't spend 12 hours on a drawing for your notes. You can't be perfect. Right? This isn't going to go in a gallery anywhere. This is going to be your notes. Only you're going to look at it and possibly me. So just make sure that it's quick and it can really be used to help accent the information and not just drudging through it. All right. A lot of times you're going to be combining your note styles. So you like some visuals, but you're not really good at keeping those visuals to a minimum and quickly drawn. So do concept mapping. Right? From that concept mapping, add some visuals to it. All right? So you can blend Cornell and visuals. So one of those columns in the Cornell notes, instead of having key ideas or summary, is you can have visuals trying to make those connections. Concept maps in Cornell. So the big area of the Cornell map, or the Cornell notes, is actually the visual, the concept map part. And then you have your questions and you have your summary. And you can have concept maps and visual, we already talked about, and you can have outlining and visual. You can go ahead and take your notes, and then out to the side, add the pictures in to show those connections, because we've already identified that outlining, the main problem is being able to show those connections. Maybe that's where the visuals can help you out. All right, and there are other ways to combine these. These are just some of the examples I saw right off the top of my head. All right, so find that style, all right, and this is what you're going to do over the next couple of days while you're reading that first chapter. All right, remember it's a skill. All right, you got to pick the one that goes along with you, but you got to develop that skill. And remember that it's going to get better. All right, this is your first time really taking college level notes in a high school situation. So it's going to get easier throughout the year once you get that practice. And always think of the payoff. Always think of the payoff. One of the biggest things that college professors, I hear time and time again, whether it's a news article or talking to some of the college professors I still know, is one of the things that they say is coming out of high school, students don't know how to take notes anymore. They're used to just taking pictures of something. But what if they're not putting the notes on the PowerPoints? Then you're struggling. I had a professor who was amazing. He had these PowerPoints of 300 slides long every time he did a lecture in class. But he didn't have any notes on them. They were all completely visuals. If I didn't know how to take notes on the reading and in his lectures, I would have struggled because he didn't have those to go along with. All right, so always take a look at that end point in mind, that you're doing this to be better in college.